Chapter 2, First Assignment. I was angry. Great start to a chapter. And I hoped that Magnus was in his office because I needed to speak with him immediately. And if there was anyone lurking outside this time, there might be some new rumors for the Endgame rumor mill soon. Because, counsel or not, I might be inclined to get loud this time. I had ditched training in favor of cornering Magnus for a serious chat about what they'd done to me and the actual legality of it. Oh, did girl find out some stuff? I didn't know how much YUU had expected me to find when he suggested I dig into Endgame's regulations on my own. Oh, right. No doubt he had no expectation it would send me on a research spiral that took up a day and a half of my free time. One that led me from Endgame's intense, convoluted rulebook, but also into triad legal policy regarding adult Espers. Yes, funny that little nugget, isn't it? But that is what happened. It was embarrassing that I'd never looked into the legislation before. Embarrassing that, without YUU's encouragement, I might never have looked into the actual laws that define my place in society. The ones that the council had been using like a cudgel to beat me over the head with as they insisted I was a danger to society. Without YUU's offhand advice, I might have gone on assuming they were not lying through their teeth this whole time. I stopped mid-stride and took a slow breath. I needed to calm down. As infuriating as it was to realize how ignorant I'd been and how wrong they were, anger was going to help me less right now than simple determination. Magnus might try to weasel out of talking about it, but that's why this was going to be an ambush. Oh, hey, we haven't seen you in ages. How's Queendom going? How's the road to Queendom going? I passed a group of junior agents on my way, nodding slightly when I saw a familiar face among them. She started to say hi, but I was already past them before the word was out of her mouth. Interesting. You guys are on friendly-ish terms, I hope? Whispers rustled behind me, but I ignored them and kept walking. What was her name again? Carrie or something? At least if a rumor starts up this time, I'll have a good idea who the source is. I only stopped when I reached Magnus's office, and then only a second before I knocked. The temptation to burst in and demand answers was strong, but I'd play nice for now. Fortunately, he invited me in right away.
Morgan, to what do I owe this surprise?
He hesitated as he studied my face.
What's wrong?
I need to speak with you. He regarded me silently for a split second before the fake smile melted away, and he motioned to a chair in front of his desk.
I did assume that's why you were here. Have a seat.
I made my way there, unsure how he was going to take this. I told Mum in our last conversation that Magnus was eccentric, and that was true. More than eccentric, he seemed to be someone who used flippant humor and indirect remarks to both conceal his actual feelings and, sometimes, reveal them in subtle ways. He was exhausting to deal with on a bad day, but simply frustrating on a good day. All that said, I had noticed that when we were alone, sometimes the mask cracked and there were hints of whoever he was beneath the pretense. That was one reason I'd come here on my own. I was hoping for a frank discussion, not the usual passive-aggressive attempts to provoke a fight. I took a seat in front of his desk and waited for him to do the same.
I'm surprised to see you here today. I was under the impression you had training this morning.
I skipped it.
Oh my, without telling anyone? How rebellious.
As I said, I need to talk.
Yes. I'm very curious what has our dutiful little queen so upset. What do you wish to discuss with me alone in my office without your guard, my guard, or the council here to observe?
I leaned forward, resting my elbows on his desk. I've been doing some research about my status here at Endgame, Magnus.
Research? Of what kind exactly?
I was prepared for him to dodge this conversation or play ignorant, or try to provoke me. Not so much for him to seem genuinely curious. Now I had to think about how to word this so it didn't set him off. if there was a chance at a calm conversation, I would much rather that than arguing with him. A couple of days ago, you encouraged me to look into Endgame's regulations to try to find a way to support my request to go into the research division. So I did that.
You encouraged you to do it. What a troublemaker he is. That's very like him, though. And what did you find, Morgan?
A lot, actually, but it's not Endgame's regulations I want to discuss.
Oh? Then what do you want to discuss?
Actually, I have a question for you, Magnus. On what grounds, specifically, did Endgame try to apprehend me? Under what exact legal code was a citizen of New Albion apprehended, then compelled to join this organization? I was told I'd been apprehended because I was a danger to myself and others, and I assumed I was being compelled to join for the same reason. At the time, I didn't question it because I thought that it was pretty much the requirement for ranked Espers to come here. That anyone who didn't join Endgame was the exception, not the rule. But that's not true, is it? Legally speaking, there's no actual legislation that allows you to rip someone off the streets on such a vague premise. Much less force them to join up. His smile didn't fade as he stood.
On the contrary, the premise of danger is quite vague indeed. As the Council has said, you were apprehended officially on the grounds of being a dangerous unregistered Esper.
I thought that's what you'd say. But on what grounds was I declared dangerous? New Albion's laws state that someone has to be a clear and present danger to others. How does that apply to someone whose only black mark is a failure to register? How does that become a clear and present danger? What was so clear about the supposed danger?
It was an intentional failure to register.
I didn't know I was a Queen rank, Magnus. And it may surprise you to learn that failure to register doesn't label someone dangerous. It makes them have to pay a fine. A fine. Followed by registration, not by joining up.
As I said, Morgan, the law is quite vague on certain points. It doesn't define what it means to be a clear and present danger to others, for one. It doesn't even define what constitutes danger.
But wouldn't it be up to New Albion's judicial system to determine that and not Endgame?
Let's just say they leave it to us and don't question our judgments. So of course, the Council usually judges in a way that benefits them. They most likely would say that your failure to register put your family and others in danger, and that, as such, you showed a callous disregard for those around you, which would make you a danger.
A very loose interpretation, considering no reasonable person would have had any realistic expectation of being targeted by the likes of Crimson for their abilities.
You may have noticed the Council wields the law like a weapon only when it suits them, Morgan. The rest of the time, they consider us to be unanswerable to it.
They can't pick and choose when the law applies and when it doesn't.
I believe they would beg to differ.
This is a complete manipulation of legal policy, of people.
It is. And it dates all the way back to the establishment of those laws, Morgan.
You're saying it was intentional?
Not at first, no. When Espers first began to assert their place in history, people needed a way to deal with them. And here we were. It was chaos after the end of the war. No one had time to deal with these new Espers running around causing problems. Endgame was the only group capable of managing it. The first generation of laws was hastily constructed to deal with the surge of children being born with Psi. Everyone let Endgame deal with it how we wished. And that strategy became precedent. Established policy. Why make rigid laws when you have a loose precedent as powerful but far more convenient?
And everyone here just goes along with it?
You went along with it. Why?
I didn't know any better. I avoided anything to do with Esper's, Magnus.
Others also don't know better, because they don't have to know. People don't learn about laws that don't apply to them. Why question a law that has nothing to do with you? The people who do question it, look what they're up against. Who do you think can win against Endgame? No one can. We've been doing this a long time, Morgan. We know how to twist things in our favor.
You're saying that if I challenge this legally, I will lose?
Yes, I believe you will. Especially now that you've been here this long.
Right. The reason why she had, like, a foot to stand on in Reuben's route is because they didn't get a hold of her, and she was, fighting against it from the very beginning. But now, she's been here for, like, at least a month, so it's a lot more sticky. I haven't been here that long!
It's long enough. Believe me on this one.
He turned to me, studying me for an uncomfortable moment.
Morgan, I wish to be frank with you.
All right.
When I first learned about you, I also would have preferred to ignore it. It would have been better, I think, had you not been brought here.
That's odd to hear you, of all people, say.
You're observant, so I'm sure you've realized I'm not overly fond of Endgame.
I did notice that, though I maintain it's odd, all things considered.
Perhaps.
So why am I here, then?
Unfortunately, ignoring you was not an option. Crimson had already taken note, something I've told you before. We couldn't leave you be with dangerous factions wishing to do far worse by you than bring you to Cor Solaris.
I'd heard this part before.
So I thought if I had to bring you here anyway, I could at least use you as a catalyst.
A catalyst for what?
Change. Endgame's council makes questionable calls. They are manipulative. They do what serves this organization to the detriment of the people inside it. And, as in your case, the people outside it. It can't continue.
How am I supposed to change that?
By doing what you're doing. Questioning. Refusing to assimilate. Questioning things few have bothered to question before and pushing for a different path. At first, I thought I may need to intervene more. To force you into a role I imagined you would be otherwise reluctant to play. I expected to have to do it without your knowledge. Pushing you towards a confrontation with the Council that would rock this organization to its core, and finally...
He stopped himself, realizing the amount of emotion that had leaked into his voice.
You defied expectations and have refused to simply fall in line. So, I have begun to wonder if it might be more beneficial to be upfront with you about all this. To work with you.
That would be nice. Not to say like your other plan didn't work in an alternate timeline, but I'd prefer to not have the Fury sent to my room at night. Instead of just using me. I will let that slide. But answer this. Why me? Why do you even need a catalyst, Magnus?
Morgan, it's incredibly difficult for people within this organization to change anything. Most of us have been here far too long, and are too settled into accepting everything without question. We have nowhere else to go. We have no ties to anything but Endgame. But you are from the outside, not a child coming here to spend years being told how you must sacrifice yourself for the greater good. You are in the unique position of being able to call into question what has happened to you, and make others do the same. And your strong connections to the outside may give you leverage others lack. Endgame severs ties the rest of us may have. Our families are either involved with the organization or... well, Many agents are not close to their families on the outside. Their lives revolve around this place. You have connections you refuse to give up on because you didn't come here as a child. Dreams you refuse to let go of. That is a motivation most of us do not possess.
I didn't even know what to say to any of this. I didn't expect Magnus to invite me to start a revolution. I just wanted to be able to live my life. And what if I refuse to be your catalyst? What if I fight the council on my situation and leave when I get what I want?
What if I told you that I don't believe it's possible for you to get what you want without forcing some sort of change in how this organization functions? And do understand that I've been here my entire life. I know how the council works.
And if I still refuse?
You won't. Because, I note, you said when you get what you want, not if. You are determined to not be manipulated. Even if you don't want to be a catalyst, even if you somehow adapt for a time, the council will eventually back you into a corner you don't wish to be in. When that happens, you'll push back hard enough to be the catalyst I'm looking for. If that's the road you take, then fine. But I'm interested to see what you do when that occurs.
And the flippant laugh was back, though I didn't think he was actually being flippant.
On the topic of our council and their determination to be at odds with your wishes, I was surprised to see you show up in your uniform and looking so professional, since I intended to call your team in for a meeting this morning anyway. I sent the invite while we've been talking, so everyone is on their way. Which means we should wrap up this talk.
What does that have to do with me and the council?
To reiterate, I understand your frustration now that you're aware of the legal situation. I also feel that fighting it through normal means will get you nowhere. Of course, you're welcome to try.
Then what do you suggest if not the normal means? What does being a catalyst even look like to you?
Short of rallying the guard for a hostile takeover, I haven't thought about it.
Did that mean he had thought of rallying the guard for a hostile takeover? Did he expect the council to back me so hard into a corner that was the outcome? Because that was worrying. I came here for a simple conversation. I was prepared for an argument. I was not prepared for this outcome. I'm okay with it, though. You know what? If we're going to be catalyst for change in the last route of this game, I'm all for it. Let's do it. But our conversation really did have to end there for now. There was a soft knock and the door opened. Several people came in, pausing when they saw me. I tried to school my expression into some semblance of neutral. I'm just here for the meeting, everyone. It wasn't just my team that filed in, but the Kingsguard as well. Magnus's team, basically. 8 people total, and in addition, you, Sasuke, to my surprise. Yo, Magnus, you gonna involve you in this too? They spread out through the room, perching on the sofa or standing nearby. You came directly to Magnus's desk and leaned against the chair next to me. Caleb was right behind him.
What are you doing here already this morning? You had training, I hope you realize. We only just got the message you were already here.
No. Morgan and I had something to discuss. She skipped out on training at my request.
Thanks for the cover. I didn't
realize I hadn't informed them. I knew they'd be coming here in due order anyway, so there was no need.
Caleb looked between the two of us with suspicion. I feel like you is as well, just like squint. I decided to let that go. I was already too tired to contradict him.
Magnus, you can't pull her away from training without telling anyone. What did the two of you even discuss that was so important?
That, I'm afraid, is confidential information. I do apologize.
Magnus, while I'm certain the god has reason to question your obvious lies, I hope you realize that I was pulled away from important work in the medical ward. Don't waste my time with infighting amongst yourselves unless you wish me to leave. Though, if I'm here, it must mean there is news about the situation on New Terra.
New Terra? What situation?
Indeed, there is news about New Terra. Though I know you have a direct line to Roan Murdoch, I believe he is allowing President Lyra to take the lead on this, so you are unlikely to be aware.
Have we read about New Terra just out of curiosity? Yes, right. They don't have any nanites, so they're like the true humans. Right, okay. I remember now. It's coming back.
The new government there is requesting our mediation for the current relocation talks, as the Triad has agreed to another round of negotiations. Which this time means you, Odette, Ari, and, by the Council's direct order, our new Queen rank.
Ah, that's what he meant.
What?
And now, no need to look so annoyed. We can't avoid sending her out forever, and this is just sitting in on a meeting and looking intimidating if people start fighting. There's no reason she can't handle it.
Oh, for God's sake. No one goes on missions with a month of training, Magnus, no matter what the mission is.
You are more than aware that we have few cases to compare Morgan with, so I doubt that argument will pass muster with the Council, Caleb. No one with a month of training can do half of what Morgan is currently capable of.
I'm sorry, but what exactly are we going to be mediating? You said something about relocation?
I suppose that given you were a mere civilian a few weeks ago, you wouldn't know.
No. No, I wouldn't.
Then, to bring you up to speed, New Terra has undergone a radical political shift in recent weeks. It happened right around the time you entered Endgame, in fact.
It had, of course, been building for much longer, however. Yeah, they just don't really tell anyone down here what's going on until it's about ready to explode, and they come crawling to us for help. They have no particular reason to keep the surface informed of their political situation.
No, but we have connections there. Informants who give us intel about what's happening.
So, political upheaval is making people relocate?
There is more to it than that. New Terra is in a state of decline, and has been for some time. They aren't open about it, of course, but it should be obvious. The station has been in orbit since the earliest colony days. It has been repaired, renovated, its orbit adjusted numerous times, but the station is nearing the end of its life. There have been casual talks for a while about beginning the process of relocating its citizens to the surface, but it's been difficult. Due to their prevalent fears about the nanites on the surface and the way it will alter their genome to function with the nanosystem, they've been hesitant to live in any dome with a high nanite saturation.
Any nanite saturation. And as you may be aware, Morgan, we can terminate system access, we can suppress some nanite functions, and even deactivate them for a while. But there's no location on the surface that's completely devoid of them. Even the wastes. No location in the solar system, really. Even Dione has them. Coming to the surface means automatic exposure to nanites and some sort of alteration to the body. Nanite infection, as they call it.
That does seem like it would make things difficult.
More than you realize. New Terra had been, for some time, attempting to create vaccines, for lack of a better word.
A nanite vaccine?
They were hoping to inoculate their citizens so they could relocate safely. Unfortunately, this led to some rather questionable actions on the part of their government. And some unfortunate side effects.
They were exposing people without their consent to nanites, then infusing them with drugs meant to combat it, in the hopes of finding a cure. And that was the least stupid of the things they did. Due to the combination of centuries of isolation and, presumably, the lack of nanite exposure, New Terra began to see a surge in the F-class phenomenon long before we saw the surge on the surface. I won't bore you with the details of how certain traits can become more prevalent in isolated populations.
So you're saying there's more fairies up there than anywhere else? Interesting.
You're electing not to bore us with trivial medical details? How surprising. Are you feeling alright?
You looked like he might be tempted to crawl across Magnus's desk and throttle him, but someone else in the room, Caleb, it was definitely Caleb, attempted to cover a laugh with a very fake cough. These people.
The point, Morgan, is that New Terrans have always regarded Espers with suspicion, and yet, ironically, have a far higher prevalence of them than we have here. They are able to identify them with greater precision and targeted them for treatments similar to the nanite treatments, allegedly to stifle and suppress the mutation.
So on one hand, they were experimenting on the greater populace for their nanite vaccines, and specifically targeting Espers to cure them as well.
Not the upper level, of course, just the middle and lower levels, and all without public knowledge.
I'm not sure what you mean by levels.
New Terra's society has always been highly stratified. The upper levels, Ventus Terra, are the elite, the upper echelons of society, and they live in the most well-maintained sections of the station, of course. It's been sealed off from the rest of the station for decades. There's also a division between the middle and lower levels. In the past, only the lower levels, Antrim Terra, were supposed to have any nanite saturation at all, and even then it was very low. Anyone exposed to them was confined to that area of the station.
Many Espers were confined to Antrim Terra as well if they were discovered.
But it was revealed that the government of Ventus had exposed the middle levels, Solemn Terra, to a low nanite saturation decades ago during their inoculation attempts. Ventus was the only level not exposed to nanites, while scientists used the rest of the population to experiment on. This is what caused the revolt.
Okay. Very messy. Yes, that will do it. It's a miracle it took this long.
Perhaps.
What else did they possibly expect?
Who knows?
So with the new government, I assume they've given up on their cures for non-issues? Is this why there are new negotiations to get them to the surface?
You're almost correct. They have given up on treating nanite infection and curing Espers. Since the political shift, they have begun speeding up plans to migrate to the surface, mostly due to being pushed by the middle levels who feel most frustrated by the recent revelations. But the talks still aren't going well.
Why not?
Due to the vaccination experiments, a large portion of Solemn and Antrim react poorly to nanites in high-saturation environments. You've heard of nanite rejection, of course.
Of course, it's a pretty rare disorder here on the surface.
It's not a natural disorder at all. It was artificially generated by New Terra.
Really? So how did that affect winter? How is that possible? It occurs randomly, doesn't it?
It does not. All known cases can be traced back to New Terra. All of them are the direct result of Ventus attempting to create a vaccine against the nanites.
What? So how is winter connected to this then? Squint.
And the nanite resistance on the surface is quite mild compared to the majority of the cases we see on New Terra.
How much more severe are the New Terrans? Life-threatening levels?
For some of them, yes. Many of them, in fact.
That would mean they need to relocate somewhere with a very low nanite saturation, I assume. Something similar to what's on the station.
Correct.
I could see how that would complicate things, since it's severely limited where they could go on the surface. How much of the population is afflicted with nanite resistance?
Almost half by our current estimates, but it could be more.
Of course, there were other places within the system with lower nanites. Sierra, Dione. But I could understand why relocating there would provide additional challenges. And as they said before, it would be impossible to deactivate trillions of nanites in the air of even a single dome. There were just too many. Even if they tried, in a higher saturation environment, they'd never deactivate enough to prevent them from re-establishing connections. So that's why they're negotiating with the Triad. The day side of Arcalis is probably the most desirable place, but most of the day side is under Triad control.
The Triad is not keen to hand any territory over. New Terra wishes to maintain sovereignty, and the Triad won't let them settle in their domes unless they establish the city under Triad rule. Thus, Kauri Lear, the interim president, has requested our impartiality to help mediate in the negotiations. And as expected, your friend Roan Murdoch has requested you to be there too, YUU. He and Lyra seem to believe that Solemn will butt heads with the Triad. Again.
I still find it fascinating Ventus and Antrim are working together these days. It would have been unheard of when I was there.
You're from New Terra?
I was born there. However, I was fortunate that I came to Endgame long ago.
So Yuu's from New Terra. Okay. I hadn't known that about him, nor I.
You'll all get a much more detailed report before traveling, which will be in 3 days. You should acquaint yourselves with each side's requests. Your job will be to guide everyone back to topics should they stray, and stop any fights that break out. Hopefully no fistfights this time. You'll be checking on the situation in Antrim before you leave, YUU. That is, of course, the main reason you're going.
Of course.
What situation in Antrim? I assumed that would be in the mission briefing.
For a first official assignment, Morgan, you could do much worse.
This is true.
She'd do better by not getting an assignment at all right now.
You're just jealous that you can't go.
Huh.
Caleb scoffed, and it didn't occur to me until after the fact to wonder why he couldn't go.
Yeah, why is that?
Morgan, we have an entire course on managing negotiations of this sort. You don't have time for that, so I'll send you an overview. Most likely, you'll just need to let Ari do the talking. He's good at these sorts of boring tasks.
I don't doubt it.
You're all dismissed. Shoo!
He waved us to the door. I got up first and retreated, head pounding from all that nonsense. The others wanted to know what I talked with Magnus about, but you, fortunately, seemed to realize I wasn't feeling well. Thank you. He was the one who insisted I go to the infirmary when I said I had a headache, lecturing the others about migraines and fatigue as he dragged me away. Then, as soon as we were out of sight, told me there was no need for an exam or checkup because anyone would have a headache after talking with Magnus. Yuu's best boy. He sent me to my room to rest and said he would see me in the lounge later. I didn't really rest. Just laid on my sofa, staring at the ceiling, lost in everything that I'd spoken about with Magnus. None of that went the way I expected, and I had no clue what to make of it. The assignment on New Terra barely occupied my thoughts, all things considered. Too busy thinking about catalysts, changes, and how I could possibly accomplish what Magnus wanted me to. And why it had to fall on my shoulders. I turned it over and over in my head until Caleb and Ari showed up to see if I was feeling better so they could take me to the lounge for dinner.